I think surrounding yourself with people who inspire you, who make you feel good, and who support you. I have been in places where people doubt the possibilities or don't understand. Like people will say, "Why are you doing a podcast? Why are you working on this other thing when you can just do your job?" But then you have moments where you surround yourself with people who are excited to experience things in a way that you may experience them, or excited for you to try new things and be your biggest supporters.
You are listening to the Pinnacle Podcast, where we empower women in medicine through education, community, and actionable strategies for both the practice and the business of medicine.
Medicine is a lifelong career, and continuing education is crucial for professional development. Pinnacle is the first and only multi-specialty organization dedicated to addressing the challenges that all women in healthcare face.
Welcome to Pinnacle, the elite professional community providing education for women in medicine. At Pinnacle, we challenge you to pave your own path by helping you develop the skills needed to not only stay in medicine, but to excel. Welcome to the Pinnacle Prescription Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Rupa Wong, and today I'm joined by Dr. Renita White for Myth Busting, What We Should All Know About Women's Health. Dr. White is a board-certified obstetrician and gynecologist and women's health advocate. She loves to care for women at all stages of life, educating them about their bodies and encouraging them to address their physical and emotional health to improve their overall wellness and longevity. Alongside running her practice, Dr. White also co-hosts her own podcast, Cradle and All, and is a medical advisor for the Honeypot Company and serves on the medical advisory board for Flow Health, Very Well Health, Elle Magazine, and Parents Magazine. Thank you so much, Dr. White, for joining us. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here today.
And I am just so impressed by all the things that you're doing, and we're going to spend some time breaking those down and figuring out how you got there. But first, let's just address some of these myths. In your experience, what are the most persistent myths about women's health that you encounter, and how do these misconceptions affect patient care?
You know, it's so interesting because I feel like as an obstetrician gynecologist, I spend a lot of time talking with women about the most vulnerable topics that they don't feel comfortable talking to even their own parents or friends about. And so it's a great space to talk through what they think is normal and what they don't. So a lot of the myths come into what they have heard maybe normal that may not be. So the two most common things I think about are what your period should be like. So some people assume like really heavy soaking through your clothes is very normal, or super painful cycles are normal. And another thing I hear all the time is, I've never gotten pregnant before. I've never tried, but I've never gotten pregnant. So that must mean that I'm infertile. So I think that that's just an example of opportunities for learning, but they can be a part of what you think is true, but it really isn't.
That's so interesting that you say that. And maybe this is going to be TMI for our listeners, but I really believed that first one because I had PCOS, never had frequent periods. And then once I started developing frequent periods after my third one, I thought, oh, everybody just soaks through a pad, a tampon, and their underwear. That's normal, right? How do you address those myths? What do you do?
I think honestly, this is where I got my excitement for educating people, because helping everyone to get autonomy and understanding that I need to understand what's normal and how to ask the right questions outside of when I'm in front of Dr. White. So some of it starts with literally asking, what do you experience? And is this normal for you? Do you like this? Has it been a problem for you? Is it affecting your life? And trying to get an insight into what somebody's experiencing. Because a lot of what I notice is that people go based on what their parents told them or what they didn't tell them. Like, we didn't have conversations about periods, so I just assumed, or I Googled something really fast or looked it up in a book. I even had a patient today who was like, I told her about an IUD and she was like, wait, what? It's okay for me to not to have a period, because she thought the period was supposed to like flush her toxins. And so having those opportunities for people to talk first so I can kind of gauge where they're coming from, I think is the stepping stone to really busting those myths.
That's amazing. And you set that foundation for trust, I imagine, but then also are inviting with these open-ended questions that I can hear, because I know oftentimes when I would go to my OB-GYN, the old OB-GYN, I've switched. She'd say, "Oh, and your periods are normal?" I guess. And I would say, "Yes," because to me they were normal, right?
Yes.
So how would you advise physicians or even just patients start to think about things differently?
I think that we're limited as healthcare providers because we only have so much time. And so, how we frame our questions are really important. So, trying to avoid like yes or no questions. Or when I speak, I always think it's talking in different language, but like literally a layman's language of are your cycles monthly? Can you predict them? As opposed to are they normal? Or when people say, I assume I can't get pregnant, kind of starting those questions like, well, are you trying to get pregnant or what makes you think that, to begin those kind of discussions. And sometimes that means we'll have follow-up appointments and it may not all be done in that time, but that's part of building trust as we kind of work together over time.
Have you found that these myths then, or even just any kind of inaccuracies, right? Are they being fed not just through the personal relationships, but through the broader context of social media or PR in that?
Absolutely. And I mean, I love social media and I love that people are getting education in so many ways, but we have to rival that with what's correct information and what's not. And so we are, as women, inundated with marketing about vaginal products because we need to clean ourselves or we need to smell a certain way. Or it's beautiful that now people are talking about their infertility journeys or their fears about death in pregnancy. But sometimes that can mask conversations that may not apply to you. And so just understanding that context when having conversations with our patients, because that way we can lay it all out and kind of guide them based on what's going on with their own experience. So I think it's beautiful to have social media, to have all these things that are written out there about different experiences, but being able as a provider who has certain kinds of knowledge to kind of give it a certain context that may be more applicable to your patient.
And not just social media. I mean, you have a lot of roles within media themselves, your advisory role with media outlets like Elle Magazine and Parents and Very Well Health. How do you think that kind of media, because I think that's a little bit different, right, than the social media or the ads that are getting pushed. How do you think that shapes the public's understanding of women's health? And then do you have ways that you found you can advocate to improve it?
Yeah, I really love it because it, as I said, you only have like 15 or 20 minutes in an office with somebody. And so it can be a really good starting point when educating to say, we've talked about this information here. Here's some helpful, accurate information that you can expand upon at home and bring it back and let's talk more at your next visit. Or when I have so many patients who come in and they say, I saw this on TikTok and I saw this in an article, and you can direct them to articles that are more accurate or may expand upon what they've learned about. And that's part of why I was so interested in providing education outside of the office in these ways, because we all do it. I mean, I've had my own health situations that are not in my field of medicine. And I'm like, let me look this up really fast. I had a retinal detachment and I was like looking up what the surgery was going to be like.
Yes.
We all do it.
We all do it. And that's why I think it's crazy when I see doctors on social or wherever saying, oh, don't Google. Well, that's the first thing I do is
Everyone
Google.
does.
So everyone does. I hope your retinal detachment went okay.
It went smooth. Will you believe I had one in each eye, but I am good.
Oh my goodness. That's a difficult, for people that don't know, that is a very challenging surgery to undergo. It's potentially vision threatening. I'm glad that you had a good result with that. But it's exactly what we do even in healthcare when it's outside of our realm of expertise. But I want to hear just more about what you do as a medical advisor for these big media outlets. Do you write the articles? Are you just editing them? Do they bring it to you? Do you pitch ideas? Because there might be people that are interested in that.
I will say it's been so fun to have so many ways of doing it. So for many of the boards that I'm on, I may review articles that are written by different health writers, and I can review it for accuracy. And so I may provide some guidance on things that should be changed, or maybe some newer innovations that are out there that should be added or considered. I've had opportunities to write articles, so I've been able to do that just myself. And then I can pitch ideas as well of things that are relevant to what's going on currently. So I've been lucky to be able to kind of explore all of those different article options. And then I ended up starting a podcast when I was pregnant and going through different stages of that and having the perspective as a patient as opposed to, being the provider. So that was just another opportunity to give a different lens to what my patients may see. And I think that's really added to my work as a doctor and how I interact with patients of all kinds.
I totally think when we are on that other side, and then also when we are really trying to formulate content to put out there for the patient perspective, because there's also a lot of content for other medical health professionals, but I think it's really different because then it attunes us to their needs, right? And their
Yeah,
perspectives.
no, absolutely.
So how did you get started? We're going to back up for a second. How did you get started on this journey? I know we jumped into the myths because I was so intrigued by it, but how did you get started on your journey? What brought you to OBGYN and to women's health and becoming an advocate and an educator in this way?
Yeah. So, as far as I can remember, I've always loved women's health. Something about maybe my interactions with doctors growing up, having somebody who can talk to me about things that I was learning about and maybe my family members weren't open to discussing. I am a first generation American. My family is from Guyana, South America. And so I was one of the first people to go to college, let alone the only person to go to medical school. And as I was exploring the different fields, I just really resonated to helping people feel comfortable with topics that maybe they didn't feel comfortable discussing. And interestingly, coming from immigrant parents immigrant family members, grandparents, and aunts and uncles who have a little bit of distrust for the medical field, finding a way to make them feel more comfortable with talking about all aspects of their health and asking questions when they're in front of the doctor was a lot of my motivation. So I think going through medical school and focusing on that, I just was like, let me get to the end goal and just be a doctor and finally get to that point. And then when I actually was a doctor, I was like, okay, what else is there? I'm excited about this, but I just want to teach as much as I can. And, I went to Pinnacle Conference the first year, and I was so motivated after seeing you guys and all the amazing things that people were accomplishing outside of what was like on paper, what you can do in medicine. And so it gave me the confidence to kind of explore different ways to educate outside of in the office. And so I signed up for this website called Harrow, which was a way that journalists could reach out to people who they need expert advice from about medical topics. And so that's how I first got my foot in the door with providing feedback about articles or sending a pitch or a quote. And then eventually I got more confident and I sent some like cold emails to different magazines and ended up being asked to join some of the medical boards after I'd given some ideas. And then from there, I just got more confident. And so then I made some connections and continued from there. And it just, that confidence helped me to kind of expand on something I always wanted to do, which was educate. And that's what it all came down to.
That's amazing on so many levels. First, I love that you came to the very first pinnacle and that kind of maybe hopefully prompted a little shift or pivot in your career and the trajectory. But also so much kudos to you because as people in medicine, those avenues are not really known to us. How to send a pitch email, how to just send a cold email to magazines. And you were able to do that. Did you figure it out on your own? Did you reach out? Did you have mentors or sponsors? Or you just knew I want to educate about women's health. I want to be able to really negate some of these misconceptions that are out there. And it just came from that.
Yeah, I literally just was like, I'm going to take a little bit of a risk. My confidence was so built coming out of Pinnacle. And I remember, do people even buy magazines anymore? I don't know. But I remember going to a magazine aisle and like picking up all like Glamour and Cosmopolitan. And I'd go to the front page and see like who was the health person, the health editor. And I just sent emails and maybe one or two responded. But when that one did, then and this was after months, then I felt like, okay, well, that's one. And now I have an article I've written for this one. So then the next one, I will say, look at what I did here. And it
Right.
just continued from there. And for example, like when I had the podcast, when my sister and I, we do it together, when we decided to do it, I was like, well, I don't know anything about podcasts, but I heard some other people do them. Let's just look it up. And it's something about realizing that your career can be whatever you make it. I always assume that in medicine, you follow the path that was laid out for you. And it starts with college and med school, and you have to follow what people tell you. And once I realized that I can be an entrepreneur, I can do what I want to do, then I was like, what do I have to lose? I have my day job. So
I love it. That's exactly right. And I think that I've felt the same way. And so many of us, we want a little bit more. We want to affect change a little bit differently. And it's amazing what you're able to do, especially as you said, in coming from a community or a family that had a little bit more mistrust of those in medicine. And then you are really bridging that gap, which is truly amazing. And the way that you just I'm going to go for it is inspiring, I think, for many, and hopefully they'll feel inspired if they're listening to go out and be that change for themselves and think about other ways that they can create on their own. Now, you also are a doing not just your podcast and not just all of these advisory boards, but you are also an advisor for Flow Health and Honeypot Company, and those are focusing on menstrual and reproductive health. So, can you share some holistic health tips for women that you think might be often overlooked?
yes, absolutely. So I think that health in general, we oftentimes, at least in our country, we think a lot of it as when you're sick and when you're not. But part of the reason I love being an OBGYN is that we're caring for women through all the different stages. And so, what my goal is, what I try to encourage is to think about your health as what you would do in your daily life. And so, those are opportunities to expand upon when you're trying to deal with something like getting pregnant or dealing with your cycles. But it all starts with a lot of the basics. So, the impact that sleep and diet has on things like PMS, menstrual symptoms, fertility, all endometriosis, like those are really big things. And so when I talk to patients and talk about everyday life changes, we talk about how to incorporate lifestyle changes that are going to be sustaining and help with any of those things come about. So, in our routines, where do we find sleep in there? How exercise plays a role in helping to improve menstrual cramps, or people who have fibroids and endometriosis may improve that as well. There's not a lot of great data on diet and vaginitis like yeast and BV, but we know that it's there and how it may have an impact. So overall dietary changes that can have impact on things like losing weight, but also things like vaginitis. So I think that's really important when we're thinking about all aspects of health. But for me, as somebody who I encounter patients yearly or regularly, that's stuff we want to talk about all year round.
And that's, I mean, those are lifestyle changes that can have broader repercussions for them as well, right? Sleep is
Mhm.
good for us to have, not just for menstrual or reproductive health, but everything. But again, a lot of us have that time crunch, right? I'm not in your field, but the similar kinds of things in our fields, you have 15-minute appointments. How can you start to have these discussions and address everything?
No, that's so true. So I think that one of the things I like to remind people about is that they have access to me more than once a year. So some of it's building trust and a rapport over time. We live in a time where we have access to things like the portal for many places, and we are going online and looking at things as we discussed. So I usually use appointments as a starting point to things that could be expanded upon later. I am somebody who likes people to leave with like paper in hand or some kind of educational
Mhm.
thing in hand. So one of the beauties about working for things like Honeypot or for Very Well Health is I can refer them to an article and say, hey, read more about this PCOS we talked about today. And so when we follow up next time, in addition to you doing XYZ, you can continue to ask these questions. But I think healthcare is changing in a lot of ways where not only do we have access to more as patients, but we have the technology that can be beneficial to expand upon the little time we have in the office. So that's something that I try to do.
How do you use technology? Because I love using all sorts of different types of technology, whether it's texting or like, how do you use it with your
Yes.
patients or even just with your side consulting type gigs?
Yes, perfect. I think every patient comes to my office. I'm like, pull up your app. Let me see your period tracker. Cause like everyone's using them now.
Yeah.
So that's so helpful for me because somebody may come in and say, I have irregular cycles and I never know when my cycle is going to come up. But if they can pull up their tracker, which a lot of people are using, or even a calendar, then I can see, well, actually, your cycles are more predictable than you think. It's just every 35 days. So you have a longer normal cycle. So that's one really great thing. And being able to show them functionality of like, for the Flow app, for example, like you may be complaining if I get bloating every month. Well, you can write right here for the next 3 months. Let's see, when is the timing of that? Other things are like the portal, for example, you may not have the ability to answer every question, but I encourage people to email me back. And so we can, I mean, we don't all have the time to email people all day long, but to
Yes.
know that like you have access to me more than you think you do. Because for me, as somebody whose family members who felt like they couldn't even ask a question in the office, I'm always encouraging people to don't be afraid to ask. Don't be afraid for a second opinion. Like you have a voice, and I want people to feel like they can use it.
And do you find that a lot of people are embarrassed or still shy to ask the questions, and then they do via the portal or the email?
Absolutely. It's one of those things like you put your hand on the door to say, okay, see you next time. I'm like, wait, one more thing. So
Always, always.
So absolutely that happens, but it's one of those things that they may not be comfortable the very first time, but knowing that come on back next time we'll continue these conversations. Like I've got several patients who may not be sexually active and they're nervous about that first pap smear, and we may not be at the point that first time to get to even the pap smear, but we can talk through it, and next time that you're comfortable with Dr. White, and so maybe that next time you'll be comfortable with the exam. And that's what we all as providers need to be understanding of, is that people come in with fear with things that we may be really comfortable with seeing all the time.
And it's hard sometimes when you've been in practice for many, many years. It's easy to forget that
Yeah.
this is new for them, even if it's not new for you. And you've seen it many, 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 many
Yeah.
times. Now,
That's
how do
true.
you balance all of this? Because I know that you have 2 boys, and remind me, how old are they?
They are 6 and 3.
So in the thick of it, how do you balance your practice, the advisory roles that you have, and motherhood?
I will say I'm so lucky to be a part of a practice where my partners are so encouraging of all of us to do what we want to do in our careers. One of my partners travels a lot, and we know that when she's here, she's working hard. And when she's not, she's traveling with her family. And so that gave me a little bit of encouragement to kind of live the life that I wanted to live, even though it wasn't looking like everybody else's. And so I really, when I'm at work and I'm focused in the office, I structure my schedule where that's my focus. But then I have little blocks where I will do the things I do on the side otherwise, but always making sure that I can focus with the kids. And they are very aware when the microphone comes out, mommy's on her podcast, mommy's doing this and that. But it's really fun to feel like I'm living the life of my dreams in all the different aspects of my life. So as a mom in the office or in the operating room, and doing what I do outside of the office, so to speak. So I just try to make sure that each of those buckets are filled where they can. And when I need a break in one of them, I just take my little break.
I love it. Now, for many of the people that are listening to this podcast, they are women in healthcare. Do you have a pinnacle pearl for them based on your experiences?
I would say, I'm like, is this common knowledge? It feels like it's my common knowledge because I'm living it now, but I know that years ago I didn't feel this way. There are so many possibilities when you think about what you want for your life and go for it in that way. And don't let anybody dictate what that should look like. As I mentioned, first generation American, nobody has carved the path that I am carving. I've seen my sister do it in her own way. My mentors do it in their own way in their different aspects of life. But just really manifesting what it is that you want for your life and know that it can change. So I would say, don't put boundaries on what you want for yourself, because if it doesn't fail, you can pivot. And then don't be afraid to pivot where you need to. Those are the two things that I've kind of learned in the last few years. And I would say I'm relatively newer in my career and in my role as a mom and all of those things. But it's exciting to see the potential when I open myself up to possibility. So doing that as a mom, as a doctor, how I educate, because since that's important to me, has only been positive. So I would say the same to anyone else who's kind of carving their own path right now.
I love that. And But that's scary. How did you overcome that fear? Because it deviates from, like we discussed, the step, one foot in front of the other aspect that many of us have in the medical journey, right? Just be pre-med, just get through med school, just get through residency, and then you're out on the other side. So you deviated from that, and that can cause a lot of anxiety for a lot of people. So how do you recommend opening yourself up in that way?
I think surrounding yourself with people who inspire you, who make you feel good, and who support you. I have been in places where people doubt the possibilities or don't understand. Like people will say, "Why are you doing a podcast? Why are you working on this other
Mhm.
thing when you can just do your job?" But then you have moments where you surround yourself with people who are excited to experience things in a way that you may experience them, or excited for you to try new things and be your biggest supporters. So you may not know where to find those people. And it could be at conferences like how I have had that opportunity. It could be meeting somebody at a networking event or a neighbor, but try to surround yourself with people who make you feel the way that you want to feel. And that positive spirit will direct you to where you want to go. And I think that's kind of been what I've done, just surrounding yourself with those who are going to support you in the way that you need.
I love that, because that's something that is actionable that people can take away and hopefully maybe even institute one small practice right now, today, tomorrow, to start really that journey that you have. All right, tell us what you are doing currently.
So, probably a little bit of too much stuff, but
I want to hear it all.
I do my job as an OBGYN in the Atlanta area. My practice is called Georgia OBGYN. I am on the board of the several organizations we talked about. So Very Well Health and Help.com, the Flow app, and Honeypot. I have my podcast, Cradle and All. And whenever I get back to it, a YouTube channel that I've been starting up that I need to get back to. And I've got my two young boys, Jackson and Russell, who keep me busy. And I just love experiencing life in their eyes. And I'm at a place in my life where I'm just continuing to explore a lot. So I've been excited about going to different conferences and opening myself up to different experiences professionally, meeting other women. And so I think I'm in a period of growth. And so I hope to run into other pinnacle women and like-minded women in the coming months.
That's very exciting. And we hope you guys will connect with Dr. White. Renita, where can people find you?
Yes. So on Instagram, my handle is Renita White MD. I have a website, renitawhitemd.com. And my podcast is called Cradle and All, that is on all streaming services.
I love it. I love the consistent branding, and I am absolutely going to subscribe to that podcast. You said you do it with your sister. What is your sister's background?
Yes. So my sister she's actually in education. We are 18 months apart. And we, interestingly, were pregnant at the same time in both of our pregnancies. And we got inspired to do the podcast because she's got this education background. So you would think she knows all these things about children. I've got the background in obstetrics, so all this stuff about pregnancy. But as we were talking to each other in the pregnancy journey and our early motherhood journey, we still had so many independent questions. We'd be like side Googling about things. And we were like, we're not alone in having these same questions, even though we're quote unquote experts in these areas. And our experiences were so different. So it was just an opportunity to kind of talk through motherhood, pregnancy from the eyes of different people who are similar, but not. And it's been such a great experience.
Oh, I love it. What a neat marriage of two different worlds that are also so compatible. So
Yeah.
that is something I am sure many people will check out. Well, Rena, thank you so much for being here today. It's been an absolute pleasure. I'm so excited by all that you have done and are continuing to do, and hope to see you at more future Pinnacle conferences.
Yes. Thank you again for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Pinnacle Podcast, where we strive to elevate the voices of women in medicine and inspire excellence across the healthcare landscape. Until next time, keep reaching for your pinnacle.